Have you ever experienced that sudden, crushing weight in your chest when you realize you have been left out of a social gathering? Or the creeping, cold panic that sets in during a prolonged weekend when your phone remains completely silent? In those deeply uncomfortable moments, your conscious, logical mind, what behavioral psychologists referred to as System 2, knows perfectly well that you are in no actual danger. You are sitting safely in your home. You have a locked door, shelter, and plenty of food. Your physical survival is completely secure. Yet, despite this undeniable logical reality, your heart rate elevates. Your stomach drops, and a profound, agonizing sense of dread washes over your entire body. This profound disconnect happens because the fear of isolation is not a modern emotional weakness, a lack of independence, or a personality flaw. It is a deeply embedded, primal biological alarm system controlled entirely by System 1. Your System 1, the fast, automatic, and deeply unconscious processing center of your brain is desperately hitting the panic button. In the ancient neurological architecture of human psychology, System 1 does not view social isolation as a mere inconvenience, a temporary bout of boredom, or an opportunity for self-reflection. It registers the state of being alone as an immediate, existential threat to your life. This automatic biological response is so deeply hardwired into our species that it effortlessly overrides all rational thought, forcing us to act out of sheer terror rather than logic. In this comprehensive psychological deep dive, we are going to entirely deconstruct the hidden mechanics of why the human brain is so utterly terrified of isolation. We will examine how this primal fear drastically distorts our daily decision-making, why the experience of social rejection literally mimics physical trauma in the brain, and how you can ultimately engage your analytical system to reprogram this ancient alarm, transforming the terrifying void of isolation into a powerful sanctuary of strategic solitude. To truly understand why the fear of isolation exerts such tyrannical control over human behavior, we must strip away the comforts of the modern world and examine the evolutionary crucible in which our brains were forged. When we look back at the origins of Homo sapiens on the harsh, unforgiving landscapes of the ancestral savanna, a stark biological reality emerges. Individual human beings are pathetically equipped for solitary survival. We do not possess the thick armor of a rhinoceros, the venom of a serpent, the devastating speed of a cheetah, or the raw, muscular power of an apex predator. We are soft, slow, and deeply vulnerable. Our singular, defining evolutionary advantage, the ultimate survival technology that allowed our species to conquer the planet, was our ability to form complex, cohesive social groups. The tribe was our armor, our weapon, and our absolute guarantee of tomorrow in this brutal ancestral environment. The neurological systems that govern our behavior were being meticulously coded. System 1, which operates on fast, intuitive heuristics, mental shortcuts, learned a very simple binary equation. Belonging equals life, isolation equals death. If an early human was separated from their tribe, whether by accident or by deliberate exile, their chances of surviving the winter, evading predators, or recovering from a minor injury plummeted to absolute zero. Banishment was not a social penalty. It was a guaranteed death sentence. Therefore, nature ruthlessly selected for human beings who were absolutely terrified of being alone. The ancestors who felt deep, agonizing anxiety at the first sign of social exclusion were the ones who fought frantically to stay in the group's good graces. They survived. The ancestors who were indifferent to isolation wandered off and were eaten. We are the direct genetic descendants of the hyper-anxious, desperately social survivors. This profound evolutionary heritage fundamentally shaped the economic architecture of the human mind, leading us directly to one of the most powerful concepts in behavioral economics, pioneered by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Loss aversion. In traditional economics, loss aversion is the proven principle that the psychological pain of losing a resource is roughly twice as intense as the joy of gaining that exact same resource. Losing $50 hurts far more than finding $50 feels good. Our brains are conservatively wired to protect what we have to ensure survival. When we apply this profound economic principle to the realm of human relationships, we discover the devastating phenomenon of social loss aversion. Because social bonds were our primary survival currency for hundreds of thousands of years, our brains treat the loss of social connection with an extreme, almost pathological level of severity. Making a new friend or gaining a new social connection provides a moderate, pleasant hit of dopamine. But losing a social connection, being rejected, or facing the prospect of isolation triggers a massive, catastrophic neurochemical alarm. Your System 1 heavily skews the psychological math, making the threat of isolation feel exponentially larger and more dangerous than it actually is in the modern world. This evolutionary mismatch creates a profound cognitive distortion in our daily lives. Today, we live in secure environments where physical survival rarely depends on whether a specific group of people likes us or invites us to a dinner party. Yet, because System 1 still operates on the ancient software of the savannah, it utilizes the exact same biological alarm system for a modern social slight as it did for ancient tribal banishment. When you send a text message to a group of friends and receive no reply for several hours, your rational System 2 knows they are probably just busy at work. But your System 1 does not understand the concept of smartphones, office hours, or modern busyness. System 1 only understands the ancient heuristic. Silence means exclusion. Exclusion means exile. And exile means death. Consequently, your brain floods your body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. You begin to obsessively check your phone, your mind racing to manufacture paranoid scenarios. Did I say something wrong? Are they hanging out without me? Am I being pushed out of the group? This is social loss aversion in hyperdrive. Your brain is aggressively attempting to secure your survival by making you hypervigilant to any potential sign of social decay. It forces you to overanalyze neutral social cues and interpret them as hostile rejections, ensuring that you will do whatever it takes to rapidly repair the social bond and avoid the imagined death sentence of isolation. The tragedy of this biological mechanism is that it makes us incredibly easy to manipulate. Because the fear of isolation is so biologically expensive and painful, human beings will sacrifice almost anything, including their own values, their financial security, and their rational judgment just to maintain the illusion of belonging. We buy things we do not need to impress people we do not like, simply because System 1 calculates that conforming to the group's spending habits minimizes the risk of social exclusion. We stay in toxic, draining relationships because System 1 convinces us that the familiar pain of a bad relationship is still biologically safer than the terrifying, unknown void of total isolation. Understanding this evolutionary economics of belonging is the first, crucial step in taking back control of your mind. You must realize that when the fear of isolation strikes, you are not experiencing a rational assessment of your current reality. You are experiencing a phantom reflex, a biological ghost from a dangerous past that no longer exists. System 1 is running a desperately outdated program, treating a modern social discomfort as a fatal evolutionary catastrophe, until you recognize this fundamental error in your brain's coding. You will remain a hostage to the primal terror of being left alone. When we talk about the fear of isolation, our language is constantly overflowing with physical metaphors. We describe a brutal breakup as having a broken heart. We say that a harsh rejection from a peer group felt like a slap in the face. We talk about the stabbing pain of betrayal, or feeling deeply crushed by the realization that we have been left completely alone. For a long time, psychologists, poets, and philosophers assumed that these phrases were merely dramatic metaphors, linguistic tools used to describe a purely abstract emotional state. However, modern neuroscience and behavioral psychology have revealed a truth that is far more literal and far more terrifying. To your System 1, social rejection and physical injury are completely indistinguishable. To understand this architectural quirk of the human brain, we must look at the concept of evolutionary efficiency. Evolution is an incredibly resourceful designer. When early human beings needed a mechanism to ensure they stayed with the tribe because, as we established, isolation meant death. The brain did not waste millions of years designing an entirely new, complex neurological alarm system just for social exclusion. Instead, it took the path of least biological resistance. It hijacked an alarm system that already existed and was proven to be highly effective. The physical pain matrix. Physical pain is the ultimate biological motivator. If you touch a burning hot stove, the intense physical agony forces you to immediately pull your hand away. Preventing severe tissue damage, the brain uses pain to command your immediate, unquestioning obedience, to guarantee that you would fight desperately to maintain your social connections. Evolution simply wired the experience of social rejection into the exact same neural circuitry that processes physical trauma. This is not a theoretical hypothesis. It is a visible, Measurable biological reality. In the early 2000s, neuroscientists conducted a groundbreaking study utilizing fMRI machines to scan the brains of participants experiencing social exclusion. They used a simple virtual game called Cyberball, where the participant believed they were passing a digital ball back and forth with two other real human players. In reality, the other players were computer programs. Midway through the experiment, the computer players were programmed to suddenly stop throwing the ball to the human participant, effectively icing them out and isolating them from the game. It was a trivial, almost meaningless form of rejection by complete strangers in a virtual environment. Yet, when the neuroscientists looked at the brain scans, the results were staggering. The moment the participant realized they were being excluded, a specific region of the brain called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, DACC, lit up violently. The DACC is the exact same region of the brain that activates when you break your leg, when you suffer a severe burn, or when you experience intense physical trauma. The brain was not processing a metaphor. It was processing literal, agonizing pain. Your System 1 uses the sensation of physical suffering as a brutal, tyrannical weapon to force you back into the safety of the group. This biological reality explains why the fear of isolation exerts such a paralyzing grip on our daily lives, and why it is so profoundly difficult to overcome with logical reasoning. When you are standing at a networking event, terrified to approach a group of strangers, your conscious System 2 is trying to supply logical reassurance. The worst they can say is no. It does not matter. You will be fine. But your System 2 is fighting a losing battle against a biological titan. Your System 1 is looking at that group of strangers and calculating that if they reject you, it will trigger the DACC. It will literally hurt. Your body begins to sweat. Your heart races, and your nervous system engages the fight or flight response, not because you are socially awkward, but because your brain is trying to protect you from what it perceives as impending physical trauma. In fact, one could argue that the pain of social isolation is significantly more insidious than the pain of physical injury. If you accidentally break your arm, the pain is acute, but as the bone heals, the pain fades entirely. You cannot sit in a chair 5 years later, think about the broken arm, and physically re-experience the exact sensation of the bone snapping. The brain does not allow you to relive physical pain. However, social pain operates on a vastly different, more punishing timeline. If you sit quietly and deeply reflect on a moment of profound humiliation, a brutal rejection, or a time when you were completely abandoned by your peers years ago, you will feel the exact same cold ache in your chest. Your stomach will tie itself in knots, because social survival was so critical to our ancestors. System 1 is designed to never let you forget the agony of isolation. It stores the memory of social pain with high-definition clarity, ready to re-trigger the physical sensation at a moment's notice to ensure you never make the same mistake again. This leaves us trapped in a deeply unfair neurological paradigm. We are highly advanced, intelligent beings navigating a complex, modern world. Yet, we are being aggressively steered by an ancient brain structure that punishes independence with the neurological equivalent of physical torture. Recognizing this pain matrix is the key to understanding that your fear of standing alone is not a failure of character. It is a testament to how aggressively your biology is engineered to keep you connected, even when that connection is toxic. Now that we understand the agonizing biological penalty that System 1 inflicts upon us when we face isolation, we must examine the devastating, real-world consequences of this mechanism. How does the terror of the pain matrix alter our behavior, our beliefs, and our fundamental perception of truth? The answer reveals one of the most tragic flaws in human psychology. To survive the perceived threat of isolation, we will willingly, and often unconsciously, assassinate our own logic. We will actively silence our rational system too and eagerly embrace conformity. No matter how absurd, destructive, or irrational the group's consensus might be. This phenomenon is best illustrated by one of the most famous and unsettling psychological studies of the 20th century, the Solomon Asch conformity experiments. In the 1950s, Asch brought a single participant into a room filled with several other people. The participant was told they were taking part in a simple vision test. They were shown a card with one vertical line on it, and another card with 3 lines of varying lengths. Their task was incredibly simple. State out loud which of the 3 lines matched the length of the single line. The answer was glaringly obvious. A child could get it right. However, there was a catch. The other people in the room were not actual participants. They were actors secretly working for the researcher, and they were instructed to unanimously, confidently give the wrong answer as the experiment progressed. The genuine participant watched in bewilderment as person after person confidently stated that a clearly shorter line was the exact same length as the target line. When it was finally the real participants' turn to speak, a profound internal war erupted. Their eyes, their logic, and their conscious system too knew the exact truth. The lines did not match. But their System 1 was sounding the primal alarm of isolation. To state the correct answer would mean standing completely alone, contradicting the unified tribe, and risking immediate social rejection. The results of the Asch experiment are a chilling testament to the power of System 1. Approximately 75% of the participants conformed to the group's false consensus at least once. Despite possessing perfectly good vision and flawless logical reasoning, a massive majority of human beings chose to publicly deny objective reality rather than endure the agonizing discomfort of standing alone against the crowd. When neuroscientists later replicated variations of this experiment while participants were inside brain scanners, they discovered something even more profound. When individuals conformed to the incorrect group, the analytical centers of their brains were relatively quiet. But on the rare occasions when an individual decided to hold their ground and state the truth against the group, their amygdala, the brain's fear and threat center, lit up like a Christmas tree, standing alone. Even in a completely harmless, low-stakes experiment about line lengths, triggered a massive neurological fear response. This reveals the agonizing cost of conformity. Your System 2, your capacity for independent, critical thought is a luxury. It requires safety to operate. When System 1 detects the threat of isolation, it does not merely suggest that you agree with the group. It floods your prefrontal cortex with stress hormones, effectively suffocating your logical faculties. It creates a state of intense cognitive dissonance, the deep psychological discomfort of holding two conflicting beliefs. To resolve this unbearable tension, System 1 forces a surrender. It compels you to abandon your own perception of reality and adopt the reality of the tribe. Once System 1 forces this surrender, something deeply insidious happens to System 2. Instead of acting as an objective seeker of truth, your rational mind is abruptly demoted to the role of a public relations agent for your primal fears. Because you cannot consciously admit to yourself that you are a coward who abandoned the truth just to fit in, your System 2 immediately begins constructing elaborate post hoc rationalizations. You convince yourself that the group must have information you lack. You tell yourself that the line lengths were actually quite ambiguous. You manufacture a logical-sounding narrative to justify an action that was driven entirely by the biological terror of isolation. This mechanism scales up from simple laboratory experiments to the highest levels of human society, explaining phenomena that otherwise seem completely inexplicable. It explains why highly intelligent, highly educated executives in corporate boardrooms collectively agree to disastrous business strategies, a phenomenon known as groupthink. No individual executive wants to be the sole dissenting voice, risk being ostracized, and trigger their own pain matrix. So, they all nod in agreement, steering the company off a cliff while individually believing it is a terrible idea. It explains political tribalism, where individuals will instantly abandon their deeply held moral principles the moment those principles conflict with the dogma of their political party. The fear of being excommunicated by their political tribe is vastly more terrifying than the discomfort of holding hypocritical views. Ultimately, the cost of conformity is the death of authenticity. When the fear of isolation dictates your behavior, you are no longer the author of your own life. You are merely a biological puppet, acting out a desperate script written by an ancient brain designed to survive the savannah, rather than navigate the complexities of truth and individuality. We have explored the evolutionary origins of our fear of isolation and the agonizing biological penalty our brains inflict upon us when we are separated from the tribe. But to fully understand the crisis of modern loneliness, we must confront the most devastating paradox of the 21st century. How is it mathematically and logically possible that human beings have never been more connected in the entire history of our species? Yet, simultaneously, we have never reported feeling more profoundly desperately isolated. We carry supercomputers in our pockets that can instantly connect us to billions of people across the globe. We have thousands of digital friends, followers, and connections. Our logical system, too, looks at this vast, buzzing network of continuous digital interaction and concludes that we are surrounded by a massive, thriving tribe. Yet, our System 1, our ancient, intuitive, biological alarm system is screaming in sheer, unadulterated terror, convinced that we are freezing to death alone on the savannah. To understand this modern psychological tragedy, we must understand the concept of biological mismatch and the synthetic diet we are feeding our brains. For hundreds of thousands of years, System 1 was meticulously trained to recognize safety and social connection through a very specific set of high-fidelity biological data points. When an ancient human sat around a fire with their tribe, their brain was processing millions of subtle sensory inputs per second. System 1 requires the warmth of shared physical proximity. It requires the immediate, synchronized rhythm of human breath and laughter. It demands sustained, unbroken eye contact to verify trust. It relies heavily on the subconscious processing of pheromones, the subtle mirroring of micro-expressions, and the physical sensation of touch to release a steady, calming stream of oxytocin and endorphins. These are the biological nutrients that System 1 absolutely requires to turn off the isolation alarm. This rich, multisensory biological feedback loop is the only language that the primitive brain actually understands when it comes to social safety. Now, contrast this rich biological diet with the social environment we have constructed through our screens. When you interact with a digital avatar, read a text message, or scroll through a highly curated feed of photographs, you are engaging in what behavioral scientists would consider synthetic socialization. It is the neurological equivalent of eating heavily processed junk food. Just as junk food provides a massive spike of empty calories and artificial flavor, but leaves your body starving for actual vitamins and protein, digital connectivity provides a massive, rapid-fire spike of dopamine, but leaves your system one entirely starved of the oxytocin it needs to feel genuinely safe and connected. Your conscious System 2 can read a text message from a friend that says, "I love you," and it intellectually understands the meaning of the words. But your System 1 cannot read text. System 1 cannot process emojis. System 1 is blind to digital follower counts. It only understands biological reality. When you sit alone in a silent room, glowing screen illuminating your face, communicating with 100 people online, your System 1 is scanning the physical environment. It registers a distinct lack of physical touch. It registers a complete absence of human voices, pheromones, and eye contact. The biological data it receives is clear, undeniable, and terrifying. You are alone in this room. There is no one here to protect you. The tribe is gone. This creates a brutal, agonizing state of chronic cognitive dissonance. Your conscious mind believes you are highly socialized because you have spent 4 hours messaging people. But your primitive nervous system is simultaneously initiating a prolonged stress response because it believes you have been abandoned in the wilderness. The digital illusion tricks you into thinking you have satisfied your need for connection, preventing you from seeking out the actual, physical, high-friction socialization that would actually turn the alarm off. Furthermore, The architecture of digital platforms is meticulously designed to weaponize our social loss aversion against us. Algorithms are not optimized to foster deep, meaningful human connection. They are ruthlessly optimized to maximize engagement and time on site. And, as we learned earlier, nothing captures human attention faster and more aggressively than the threat of social exclusion. Social media platforms essentially place us in a digital panopticon, a state of constant, hyper-visible social comparison where the threat of being left out is perpetually dangled in front of our faces. We are forced to watch real-time, high-definition evidence of our friends gathering without us, peers achieving milestones we have not reached, and strangers living idealized lives that make our own reality feel inadequate. Every time you open an app and see a social event you were not invited to, your System 1 does not process it as a simple matter of scheduling conflicts. It processes it as an active, hostile expulsion from the tribe. It triggers the exact same pain matrix, the DACC region of the brain, that a physical injury would. Because we are constantly checking these devices, we are effectively self-administering microdoses of social trauma dozens of times a day. We are keeping the isolation alarm in a state of perpetual, exhausting activation. We have built a technological environment that artificially stimulates the terror of isolation, while simultaneously depriving us of the biological cures required to soothe it. We are starving in a digital supermarket, surrounded by synthetic connection, and deeply wondering why the primal panic inside our chests simply refuses to go away. If our biology is rigged to torture us when we are alone, and our modern digital environment is designed to exacerbate this terror while offering no real biological relief, how do we escape this agonizing trap? Are we doomed to either constantly chase the fleeting validation of the crowd or suffer the crushing weight of the isolation alarm? The answer lies in the profound difference between being a victim of your biology and becoming an architect of your own psychology. To conquer the fear of isolation, you must engage the immense analytical power of your System 2 to execute a radical cognitive reframe. You must learn to forcefully transition your mind from the passive, terrifying state of isolation to the active, empowered state of solitude. Isolation and solitude may look identical from the outside in both states. You are physically alone in a room, but neurologically and psychologically, they are exact opposites. Isolation is a state of psychological deprivation. It is a condition that is imposed upon you against your will, either by the rejection of others or by circumstance. When you feel isolated, System 1 dictates the narrative. You are alone because you are unworthy, because you have been abandoned, because you are in danger. Solitude, on the other hand, is a state of psychological abundance. It is a deliberate, conscious choice. It is a condition you actively impose upon yourself for the purpose of growth, reflection, and deep work. The mechanism to transform isolation into solitude relies entirely on the principle of autonomy, a concept heavily studied in behavioral economics. When a human being feels they have agency and control over a situation, their physiological stress response is dramatically reduced. even in objectively difficult circumstances, when you consciously choose to detach from the crowd. You are sending a powerful, overriding signal from your rational system 2 down to your primitive system 1. You are essentially telling your primal alarm system, I am not being abandoned by the tribe. I am choosing to leave the camp for a specific, strategic purpose. I am in control. This assertion of autonomy acts as a neurological circuit breaker, stopping the cascade of cortisol and adrenaline that usually accompanies being alone, to build this architecture of solitude. You must practice what psychologists call cognitive decoupling, the deliberate separation of the physical state of being alone from the emotional assumption of danger. The next time you find yourself alone on a Friday night, and you feel that familiar, creeping, cold panic of social loss aversion beginning to rise in your chest, you must engage your system 2 immediately. Do not reach for your phone to numb the feeling with synthetic digital connection. Instead, sit perfectly still and observe the panic as if you were a scientist examining a biological specimen. Say out loud to yourself, my brain is currently firing an ancient alarm because it cannot differentiate between my quiet apartment and the African savanna. I am completely safe. This anxiety is not a reflection of my worth. It is merely an evolutionary misfire. By explicitly labeling the biological mechanism, you rip the steering wheel away from the reactionary system 1 and hand it to the logical prefrontal cortex. Once you have stabilized the initial panic, you must aggressively reframe the empty space not as a void of social interaction, but as a sanctuary for deep, uninterrupted cognitive processing. Because System 2 requires immense metabolic energy to function, it is almost impossible to engage in profound, original, critical thinking when you are constantly surrounded by the noise, expectations, and emotional contagion of the tribe. True intellectual and creative breakthroughs rarely happen in a crowded room. They require the sterile, focused environment that only deliberate solitude can provide. By mastering strategic detachment, you are utilizing the time alone to detoxify from the relentless pressure of the conformity trap we discussed earlier. You are giving your mind the necessary silence to figure out what you actually believe, completely independent of what the group demands you believe. This is a form of psychological strength training, just as a muscle must be broken down in the gym to rebuild itself stronger. Your ability to tolerate being alone must be progressively overloaded. Start by deliberately choosing to spend 1 hour a week entirely disconnected from all digital and physical social inputs. Sit with the discomfort. Let the System 1 alarm ring until it eventually realizes that no predator is coming, and it quietly shuts itself off. Over time, this deliberate practice will completely rewire your relationship with yourself. You will stop viewing alone time as a terrifying punishment and start fiercely protecting it as your most valuable, non-negotiable asset. The ultimate power in human society does not belong to the person who has the most friends or the largest digital following. The ultimate power belongs to the person who has cultivated such a profound, unshakable comfort within their own solitude that the threat of isolation can no longer be used as a weapon to control them. When you are no longer terrified of walking away from the tribe, You finally gain the freedom to walk your own path. Conquering the primal fear of isolation does not mean you are meant to live as a permanent recluse. Humans are undeniably social creatures. We still require the biological nourishment of deep, authentic relationships to thrive. However, mastering solitude gives you the ultimate leverage. You no longer have to accept toxic, draining, or superficial connections simply out of the desperate biological terror of being alone. You transition from a state of anxious dependency to a state of strategic curation. In behavioral economics, this is called designing your choice architecture. You must ruthlessly audit your social environment. Because you understand that your System 1 is deeply vulnerable to emotional contagion and conformity. You must be incredibly protective of who you allow into your inner circle. Stop investing your finite cognitive energy into synthetic, digital interactions that leave your nervous system starved. Instead, deliberately design environments that foster high friction, high-fidelity biological connections. Prioritize shared physical presence, sustained eye contact, and mutual vulnerability. Seek out a tribe that does not require you to silence your logical system too as the price of admission. A true community will challenge your ideas, tolerate your dissent, and respect your need for strategic solitude, rather than demanding blind, anxious conformity. Remember, the goal is not to eliminate your biological need for others, but to upgrade the quality of the connections that fulfill it. You are the architect of your reality. Choose your tribe wisely. Guard your solitude fiercely, and never let ancient biological fears dictate the terms of your modern life. If you found this psychological breakdown valuable, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more insights into mastering the hidden mechanics of your mind. Thank you for watching, and stay rational,